Yeah, let's chat. I think I will call the Hearthstone there. We'll be back tomorrow, chat. So I think I'm gonna shift my schedule such that I'm streaming 4 to 5 days a week rather than 5 to 6. I'm hoping that'll let me engender more healthy and creative practices, with the rest of my life. What I'm currently thinking for my schedule is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then sometimes one of the weekend days if I feel like it. And then that would also encourage me to stream longer on the days that I do stream. So that's sort of what I'm feeling going forward. Do you have anything on your mind lately? Yaw. Hey, Alex. You just get here? We're kind of wrapping up. But we're gonna chat about something for a little bit. I'll make my title Just Chatting. Just Chatting. We'll chat a little bit, and then I'll raid you into somebody else good. Dude, what has been on my mind? I had another Facebook interaction with an old mentor of mine, somebody really important in my life, and we're kind of going at it about politics. And you know me, I don't really mince words. And his response at the end was basically, I guess I can sort of see where you're coming from, but your approach is alienating. I feel alienated by your approach. So maybe you should work on your approach. Which to me, when you're talking about issues of liberation politics, it's a bit you hurt my feelings by calling me out, therefore the problem lies with you, But whenever it's still worth always analyzing your approach. I think his argument is that you never reach somebody by being mean to them. Which I kind of disagree with. I think that I was most reached in my life when somebody was pretty brutal with me. And so I'm not sure how seriously to take the criticism, because I think a criticism like that is more about what the person you're talking to is ready to hear or not. And he even said, maybe I'm a fragile white guy, but I feel off-put by you mentioning that this thing I said is a fascist talking point. That really makes me kind of shut down. Yeah, I mean, therein lies the problem. Have you ever tested your IQ? I got it tested when I was a kid, but I think IQ is, actually does more harm than good. So even if I remembered what my IQ was, I probably wouldn't share it. Okay, I can mention the talking point, because it's one you hear pretty often. I posted a post, which is all social media is, just posting posts from other social media posts. I posted a post that was, probably chill out on the music. I posted a post that was, I could just read it, it's very short. Breaking, according to CNBC, President Biden has used Title 42 to expel 690,000 people, 250,000 more people than President Trump. President Biden is using Title 42 to expel asylum seekers without their right to hearings. And my caption was, Democratic Trump way ahead of schedule, which is kind of looking for a fight, to be fair. But I think also true. it's been how long of his presidency, and he's already way ahead of Trump with deporting asylum seekers. Pretty fucked up. And the response from my good friend and mentor was, Title 42 blocks people who pose a health risk. In the middle of a pandemic, you're going to have to provide more info to shock me. On the surface, it seems reasonable, right? Like, yeah, we're in a pandemic. We don't want uncontrolled borders, right? But the problem with so much racism, sexism, homophobia, fascism, etc., is that it seems reasonable or rational on the surface before you open the hood. And the people who are saying these things aren't always fascists, or they're not always virulent racists. But as I always like to say on the channel, these structures and systems move through people. They don't necessarily define you, but they do move through you. But you do a little digging, you immediately see that lawmakers have called the policy cruel and lawless, and health experts have said that it has no medical basis, right? And you have to ask yourself, why is the first gut clench impulse to defend the president's control of the border rather than do a little bit more investigation to see how fucked up it is? But the fascist talking point in particular is basically the immigrants are going to bring in diseases. This is age-old fascist talking point. The Donkey Kong soundtrack was undercutting the seriousness. Maybe it was good then. So, whenever you hear, like, oh, we need to keep our borders safe, the immigrants might bring coronavirus in, it's just the modern incarnation of these dirty immigrants are bringing in diseases. We need to send them back where they came from. If you as a Democrat, hypothetically, heard a Republican say, these immigrants are bringing in diseases, we have to shut down the border, you'd say, oh, Trump is everything wrong with this country. Trump, this country was built on immigrants. But if you as a Democrat hear the Joe Biden administration say that Title 42 is about avoiding health risks by deporting immigrants, you're like, oh yeah, we're in the middle of a pandemic. The double standard is crystal clear to me, and it's not crystal clear to anyone who is in the mire of it. But they are both fascist rhetoric, the Democrat and the Republican line. Because, like, taking a step back and giving a little bit more thought, is the Biden administration's goal to minimize health risk during a global pandemic? If so, isn't it awfully suspicious that the only action, like the only real action they're taking to do this, is deporting asylum seekers? Why aren't schools shut down? Why aren't high-risk areas shut down? Why aren't we getting stimuli? Why isn't unemployment the way it was last year under Trump? Like, under unemployment, it's worse. I'm not getting unemployment anymore, for example. I got booted a little while ago. Are those not for the state to judge? Fuck states' rights. I really care about not sending children to their death more than I care about states' rights. And everyone should care more about not sending children to their death. You know, the states exist to rein in the federal government exists to rein in the states, and people bicker on and on and on about, but so you could say, okay, maybe it's for the states to decide. Then why the fuck was the federal government invading all of our cities last year during the Black Lives Matter protests to brutally beat down those protests? Shouldn't it have been on the states to decide whether the protests would get beaten down? So really, the states' rights versus federal government power thing, that debate is sometimes worth having, but more often than not, it's just a way to get whatever your particular agenda across is. But even putting that all aside, there are so many things that the Biden administration could have been doing to help with COVID that it's not. And the one thing they're doing is just deporting a fuck ton of asylum seekers. And the way that, like, there are literally Border Patrol agents. There were pictures of this came out this week. There are literally Border Patrol agents riding horses using whips to round up Haitian refugees. Like it's the fucking Wild West. Like it's, they look indistinguishable from images of slave wranglers from a couple hundred years ago. Why do they ride horses? Because they're big dicks, I guess. So, given all that, you begin to see how the immigrants are bringing in diseases is just pretty explicit quasi-fascism. When you're unwilling to scrutinize any of the other ways that our government could protect us from the coronavirus, like the danger for coronavirus wise, the danger is not a foreign one. The danger is a domestic one. It's the same way that we have, since 9/11, in the last couple decades, been so obsessive in the United States about foreign terrorism, when we have suffered so much more collective harm from the terror acts of domestic white supremacists, school shootings, etc. The real terrorism problem we've been facing for the last 20 years has been right at home, but we throw our gaze abroad to repress it, to ignore it. Honestly, like, why do they ride horses? I think because it's fun for them. As fucked up as it is to say, why do our police need military grade weaponry? Because it's fun for them. Mortality in 70 plus is 7% with corona. Kids are in most, if not all cases, the carriers for the virus. So I somewhat understand that a school in a far reach state, a lot of distance, that those schools can still be open. I mean, I don't know what I would make the policy, but it wouldn't be this. I don't know what answer I would give for how to go about schooling, but it wouldn't be this. Maybe in areas with, like, what you could make a threshold, right? If coronavirus is green in certain areas, then school districts can open, but they shut down and go to online schooling when it moves up to yellow. You could do something like that. But what we're seeing instead is schools opening in red areas and then the school having to shut down after a week of being open because of horrible outbreaks. It's kind of devastating. I think it's intimidation in both cases. Yeah, that as well, of course. Yeah. We could talk about the phallus, symbolically speaking. The phallus is kind of the central anchor of patriarchy. And it's not just dicks, although we associate phallus with dicks. The horse can be the phallus, the gun can be the phallus. And the phallus doesn't exist, but men who are embedded in toxic masculinity have to believe it exists so that they can believe that they have control over their environment. And not just men, but women too, and non-binary folks can succumb to the wiles of the phallus. And the intimidation that you mentioned is part of that. The whip also is a phallic symbol. And like, can you imagine a situation where whips are actually the most efficient way to round people up in this day and age? No. Why are they using whips? It harkens back to the imagery of the slave master. So yeah, intimidation for sure. More often than not, not super relevant and not just an abstract debate, to be fair. It's more often than not super relevant. It becomes relevant in a court case like the recent Supreme Court betrayal over Roe v. Wade. So they allowed Texas to outlaw abortion. This is another case in which I think it should not be up to the state. It should be a federal mandate. But the thing is, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing, because if you leave things up to states' rights, you're basically leaving half or over half of the country at the mercy of horrible state leadership. But if you give the federal government more power, they're going to fuck us 6 ways from Sunday too, because I think ultimately I would like to see the federal government set these mandates so the state can't fuck with them, but our federal government right now is trash, so that's why voting will not solve jack shit. Get the mind state to a better state? Are you talking about, like, kids are going to be harmed by not going to school in person? I think that's true, but they will be harmed more by dying. Or their parents or grandparents dying. So we can take a hit in terms of education. And, like, honestly, our school systems, for the most part, suck ass anyway, so I don't know how much the kids are missing. Really, it's the social part that probably hurts the most. Not being able to see other kids in person. They opted not to hear the case, which is still bad, but they did not uphold it yet. Yeah, I hear there's, like, challenges in the works. And I'm hoping against hope that it'll get struck down, because as we mentioned on the stream the other day, there are literally bounty hunters being incentivized to hunt down pregnant women and turn them into the state in Texas. The dying argument is not rational to facts. Okay. That's a good one. Something I say a lot on the channel is that it's worth being mistrustful of anyone who says that their view is right because of the facts or because it's more rational. Because saying that your argument is more rational is 9 times out of 10, or perhaps 99 times out of 100, a rationalization to justify your already pre-existing viewpoint. So we're all subject to ideology, which is our worldview, which is invisible to us. And our minds will bend over backwards and do loop-de-loop hula hoops to maintain that worldview. And we will always think that that worldview is the most rational thing simply because it's the one that we hold. So an appeal to rationality does nothing for me. You know, there's no objective rationality. You can talk about objective logic, but it doesn't mean what most people think it does. Because logic is like a real mathematical thing that you can learn. It's like it's a practice. But the way most people use logic is, it's logical for my opinion to be the right one, yeah. No state control because of distrust in the system is not helping the system, right? I'm not entirely sure what you're getting at. No state control because of distrust in the system. I don't think our political system can be salvaged. That's kind of where I stand. I don't think there's any way to reform it. I don't think the problem is corruption. I think that the system was designed to oppress and designed to fail. So I'm a burn it all down kind of a leftist. It's the only way I see forward. The system is designed pretty expressly to maintain the control of capital in the hands of the old money fuckers who have been controlling it since the inception of this country. And, you know, anti-woman laws like the abortion ban, you know, anti-black laws like the war on crime, these all exist to uphold capitalism. Because even though racism and sexism aren't a requirement for capitalism, they interface in such a way that makes it much easier to control the population. So they do rely on each other very, very expressly. How would the state get aware of the problems without them getting the chance to fuck it up? Fuck it up? Pick it up? Fuck it up? Fuck it up and then re-elect would be different. You're talking about like incremental change, like the next administration will be better if the good guys get a little bit of control. It's a nice idea, but it never happens. If you track the political shifts of the last 50 years, it has been a slow march to the right. Even as administrations have changed hands, both the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States have moved farther right. So the tug of war of switching presidents every few administrations, switching allegiances, is more or less a smokescreen that allows both parties to become more corporate. And at this point, I don't think there's much difference between the Democrats and the Republicans functionally. State control on the virus would be beneficial for the system. But then you're just abandoning all of the folks who have shitty state leadership, though. You're kind of just abandoning them to suffer. I think the best shot that we had at having an appropriate response to the virus was electing Bernie Sanders. Maybe Elizabeth Warren would have been better, I don't know. Better than Biden, probably. But since that was never going to happen, everyone said we need to get Trump out so that we can fix coronavirus. But now that Trump is out, not a goddamn thing has changed, and nobody seems to care. Bernie all day. Yeah, they weren't going to let him win. In a lot of ways, I think things are worse under Biden than Trump, which is just a horrifying notion. And it's one that I saw coming, and I just had so many arguments a couple years ago with liberal folks who were saying basically that I should refrain from critiquing Biden and his administration to be entirely until after the election, which is another old, tired talking point that has been used to shut the left up for the last 50 years. Oh, just wait, the time will come, the time will come. And in fact, this is the same argument used to try to shut Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement up. Oh, the time is not now. Don't force the issue. We'll make incremental change. The time will come. And they said, no, fuck that. The time is now. And they were right to do so. And it's all kind of shite. And a couple of years ago during the election cycle, I would pick fights on Facebook. I would start threads, and then like 5 or 6 people would get involved, and they'd be many, many comment threads. These days, I post something exactly as incendiary as before, and maybe one person likes it, maybe one person comments. And it's because now that the election is over, liberal Democrats, especially white liberal Democrats, have no personal reason to give a shit. So in their selfishness, they're just kind of repressing everything and pretending like we're okay now that Trump's out. It's callous, but what has changed is that the vaccine is available and most of the people more at risk are choosing to be. It's true that that has changed, but that would have been the same under the Trump administration as the Biden administration. And Biden doesn't have, Biden's not doing the anti-mask, anti-vax thing that Trump was doing for a while. I guess he wasn't really anti-vax because the vax wasn't around yet, but anti-mask. But the harm has already been done. Those movements are started, so another Trump administration wouldn't have really made those movements worse. And besides, since he got coronavirus, he was more pro-mask after that. So the virus does make things, sorry, vaccine does make things different, but that's not in any way, shape, or form thanks to Sleepy Joe. Democracy, Marxist, Lenin, I assume you mean Leninism, Leninism or communism. What do you see, Alex, as the distinction between Marxism, Leninism, and communism? I think democracy can't work until capitalism is abolished, and even then, I don't know if it's the system that we'll go ahead with. Because democracy has, not since ancient Greek times has democracy been about giving everybody a voice. Democracy is about giving white men with land a voice. That's how it was when the country was made. And in some way, that's still how it is now with mass voter suppression, gerrymandering, redlining, all these things. So, I guess I would say I'm a socialist. I don't really. It doesn't really rev my engine to pick a label for myself. I guess I could do a lot of research into the different strains of leftism, but mostly I'm an anti-capitalist. I think that we need to gut capitalism and figure out what comes next from there. And as we gut capitalism, we need to ward off fascism. Those are really my two main priorities. Once we do that, maybe it's socialism, maybe it's communism. We can have endless debates about what sort of equitable system we want to implement. But not giving him credit for the vaccine, I'm saying it is difficult to do a shutdown when the majority don't want it, whether that is because they are vaccinated or because they don't believe or care about COVID. Is it true that the majority don't want a shutdown? If we shut down and provided people with a reasonable stimulus, perhaps a weekly or a bi-weekly stimulus, and had free testing, and maybe even do something like they did in, I believe, South Korea and some places in China, where they had regular food deliveries to everyone who was in the shutdown. If we did all those things, provided unemployment for people who needed it, you guys have to pay for tests. It really depends. It really depends on what's available in your area, I think. I haven't looked that much into it. I think most people can get free tests. Some drugstores have them. You can get them in the mail, maybe. But like free delivered regular testing is something that we don't have. It's something you kind of have to seek out on your own. I think we buy the ones at the drugstores. They're not free. Is there a way to get free tests? I don't know. Maybe through the mail. But is it really the majority that don't want it? I think that there are butthead Republicans who believe, or libertarians who believe in the free market and think you should never shut down anything. Those people should be fucking ignored. There are people who still believe that coronavirus is not that serious and a hoax. Those people also should be fucking ignored. And then there's people, I think, who are much more common, people who are afraid that if you shut down, their livelihood will be ruined. So I guess what I'm saying is if you provide for those people the way that so many other governments have throughout the world, I think the vast majority will be in favor of the shutdown. I could be wrong. Maybe the US is more fucked in the head than I even realize, but I think that the opposition to the shutdown is more about fear that we won't be provided for. And I also think the people who are most vocally anti-shutdown are a kind of a cacophonously loud minority. And they get a lot of coverage on the news, so we mostly hear about those folks. But, like, would most people rather risk their lives to go to work every day? Or would most people rather stay home, be provided for, and stay safe? I think the latter is the case. And this conversation is another way in which approaching it with empathy can, like, give some insights, because, like, you could say that, oh, people don't actually want to shut down. But why is that? I think it's because of fear and anxiety. So if we could address that fear and anxiety, we could address the real problem at the root of it. And live in a country that isn't marching us to our death. But that's not going to happen. Thanks, Joe. In a political system purported to be highly democratic, public opinion should presumably matter a great deal in the policy decisions of government. Is this actually the case? No. The United States elected leaders are pretty famously atrocious at actually representing the people. They're in the pocket of corporations. They really represent corporations more than their constituents. So I really actually don't think that we're a democracy, properly speaking. I think we're more of a corporatist system. When was the last time you cut your hair? I want to grow out mine. I think it's been like 2 years, Feo. What's the longest you've grown your hair out? This is definitely the longest for me. I've had it long before, but not like this. Oh, chat. I got mammed yesterday for the first time. Maybe for the first time. I got mammed at Chipotle. What would you like on your tacos, ma'am? Mammed. Nah, not Sag. Not Sag at all. I'm comfortable enough in my gender that I don't freak the fuck out when someone misgenders me. Like most men do. Excuse me? Did you call me a ma'am? Who cares? I kind of enjoyed it. Yeah, but I was in an establishment, so I had my mask on. And it's also kind of a girly mask, so. Beard covered up, long hair, girly mask. Got mammed. And then I opened my mouth. I was like, oh, cheese and sour cream. I hope she didn't. I'm sure she was far too busy at work to feel any certain way about it. I was like, should I have pitched my voice up? Can I have some cheese, sour cream, lettuce? You've been mammed more times than you can recall. If it's happened before, it's been pretty rare. Two months max. You should try it out. I like it. It has gotten along to the point that when I roll over in bed, I'm always pulling at my hair, which is annoying, but otherwise, I like it. I was thinking about whether I want to cut it anytime soon or not. I'm not sure. People want to go spend their money, want to go buy shit, want to drink expensive drinks in bar. There are a lot of liberal folks who were pretending to care very much about all of this under Trump, but then would happily go eat brunch to be served by an overworked service worker who's scared for their life. Which shows how much of our political discourse is a circus. What's the expression? Horse and dog and pony show? Something like that. You cut it for interviews. Yeah, you're not gonna give a job to no hippie. The anti-hippie discourse in this country never really ended, just like the Cold War Red Scare shit never really ended. We got brainworms here in the USA. But yeah, public opinion probably should matter a great deal more. I think there should be more. You know how, like, the UK voted on Brexit? It didn't end well, but I think there should be more just, like, population-style votes on things like who the president should be. Fucking electoral college. But yeah, like, things matters of public issue. At least as a stopgap until we figure out what the next system is. Because what we really have are elected leaders who, as I said, are representing corporate interests far more than the vast majority of public opinion. And there are polls that are like, do you all out there support defunding the police, for example? Overwhelming support last summer. Did it happen in any city? No. Oh, we got a rude person here. All right, see ya. Do you agree that one step to finish capitalism, we need to consume less? Yeah, so that's you have correctly predicted that I think that we can't, as individual consumers, fix anything by changing our consumption habits. The catchphrase of that point of view is that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, and I believe that. You don't like every action movie having a villain with a Russian accent. It's so funny. So funny. Like, the CIA actively controls what exists in our blockbuster movies. And we think that China's so scary because they have propaganda. As if we don't. At least China mostly keeps their propaganda to themselves. We splooge ours all over the entire world. But I don't think we can really put a bullet in the head of capitalism by changing our consumption habits. Same with climate change. You know, like, you could look up any number of statistics about how 95% of recycling actually gets trashed anyway, and how 95% of emissions are actually these 7 mega conglomerates, and blah, blah, blah. So it's the top-down problem, I think, not a bottom-up one. I'm very skeptical of any argument that has its beginnings and ends in individual responsibility. I think any meaningful political movement is collective action. But that being said, sure, change your consumption habits. Just like I say, sure, go ahead and vote. It can't hurt. So. But that being said, if we do manage to take steps towards a capitalist upheaval, all of us will have to change our consumption habits at one point or another. Like, Amazon, fast food, all these creature comforts that we've come to be familiar with, they won't be able to exist in exactly the same way after the revolution, whatever that is. And that'll be fine. We'll deal with it. Like, let's say fast food is abolished. I'll be sad. I'll miss it. But you know what I won't miss? The violent oppression and dehumanization of everyone and everything I care about. Fast food can take a hike. My plan for fixing capitalism is to implement ranked choice voting and tax automation and environmental damage. Implementing environmental damage. I think that's not what you meant, but that's a funny slip. Everything that you're talking about, Orige, would help, but it would not fix capitalism in my uh in my estimation. I don't think capitalism can be reformed because I think the system itself, the very nature of capital, demands exploitation and alienation of the workers from their labor. So, in the meantime, I would love to have ranked choice voting. I would love to have a better tax system. I would love to take drastic action on environmental damage, and we should push for those things. But I don't think we can stop our efforts until capitalism, capital C capitalism, is replaced with a different system. Because it's not just economically fucked up. You know, if capitalism continues, no matter how much of a spit shine we put on it, we will have more and more and more crashes like 2008. We'll have more bubbles, more crashes. Capitalism, by its nature, demands exponential growth, and therefore demands the just burning through our global resources and not really caring about things like climate change and racial justice. And it really comes back to Marx. He describes it all very succinctly, and not succinctly because Das Kapital is not, it's so chunky. It's 3 huge ass books, but I guess I mean crisply. He really like dissects capitalism in Capital and does an excellent job of identifying what exactly it is that's going on with the commodity. And so it's not just an economic problem, but it's a psychosocial problem. The commodity and commodity fetishism has infected us to the depths of our soul, the depths of our unconscious minds. Because part of why capitalism is so successful is because it has innovated ways to like prick at our unconscious minds and motivations. Commercials have a very sophisticated understanding of what Lacan called lack and what Freud called drive. And capitalism advertisements are just very, very, very good at exploiting these tendencies in our human nature, making us believe that the way that we can be happy is to make more money. The way that we can be happy is to buy one more thing. The way that we can be happy is to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just a problem of the economy, it's also a problem of the soul. Gotta get back to work. You have fun raging against the machine? Thanks, Enrique. Rage against the machine. Testify the bad and the chosen right. It's a funny reaction to conservatives who like Rage Against the Machine. People are like, what machine do you think they're raging against? Perchance. Could you perhaps identify the machine against which they rage? It might be instructive. A lot of conservatives hate government, so it's not that surprising. It's these conservatives who I think we can reach. The anti-government conservatives. What's up, Wayfork? Good to see you. I personally believe something. I believe many things that would make liberals' brains melt out of their ears. One of them is that left-wing, like, leftists in the United States are actually, in a lot of ways, closer to Republicans than Democrats. And I believe that there are many Republicans who, if we manage to deprogram some of the propaganda, speak directly to their fears and anxieties, and identify our beliefs in a way that's not filtered through Fox News, I really think that we could unite with poor Republicans. And there's historical precedent for this too. You know, the Black Panther Party is a great example because they were working with white workers organizations, who you would think would be like right wing or maybe racist, but they managed to find the common ground of fucking hating the government and hating the rich. And I think that the best chance we have of moving forward with real collective action is class awareness. Class, more than any category, gets repressed because race and gender and sexuality are all categories that are very much in the news because they are used to divide the proletariat against each other. Capitalism is very good at pitting groups against each other. But the one aspect that they can't do that with is class, because if you use class to divide people against each other, it will become very clear very fast that the people up top are the ones who need to be taken down. So, yeah, I think that liberal Democrats tend to stand more in opposition to the movements that I want to see because they're kind of the corporate class. They're the white folks with money. The white folks with a fuck ton of money are like the rich Republicans who run the party, but a lot of Republicans are poor and are kind of ripe for a little bit of class awareness. I've been working on my parents, for example. My parents are Republicans. My parents are lower middle class, and even though their gut clench reaction is to hate somebody like Bernie, after a lot of work and a lot of discussion, like, they can really get behind the ideas of somebody like Bernie way more than they can get behind the ideas of someone like Hillary. They hate Hillary Clinton more than anybody. And I kind of agree with them. Hillary Clinton also stands for everything that I hate. I put the emphasis there wrong. Hillary Clinton also stands for everything that I hate. So even though it feels hopeless, there are ways to move the needle, and I believe that with class awareness, we can do this, which is exactly the opposite of the Democratic Party's stance, which is we need to beat the Republicans because they need to be they're to quote Hillary Clinton, they're a basket of deplorables and should be left to die or whatever. People on the margins of both political parties are more similar than they are different. I read some article about it a few weeks ago. In truth, I believe that they may be on the margins of the Republican Party, but they're kind of the majority. I think poor people who are skeptical of the government are the majority of the Republican Party. I just think that they are susceptible to propaganda from the minority, which are the moneyed Republicans. And that propaganda points their rage at Democrats or immigrants or what have you. Black folks. Mapu. So it's weird because I guess they're marginalized, but they're also the majority, right? And that's something that gets very skewed in the media. The media does not let us see that. I'd argue the majority of the Republican Party are middle-class white people who are religious. I guess I don't feel that way, but I feel like a lot of Republicans are working class, but I may be wrong. I think that the religious right is dwindling. They're getting louder because they're dwindling, but I think that they're dwindling. Catholic churches in the last couple of decades have been shutting down all across the country because of low attendance. And I think that the Protestant Christian fundamentalist prosperity gospel fuckers, I think they're still going strong, but I think their power is very slowly dwindling. Like, there's a reason Trump became the face of the Republican Party and not Pence, you know? Pence is there to bring in all the religious people that exist. But I don't think Pence gets the presidency if he's running, right? Statistically speaking, there are now more non-religious people in the US than religious for the first time. And we're not anti-religion in this channel, but I think that is auspicious. I think that's a good thing because we are typically anti-organized religion, and most religious people in the United States are in the bag for organized religion. So seeing that trend downward, I think, is good. Ultimately, marginalization has a lot more to do with means and power than percentage of a populace. Yeah, I think that's right. It also has to do with a healthier replacement for butter. Marginalization. So, I can't believe it's not genocide. uh, yep. That's basically the American school system. You learn about the American Indians, and the book tells you, not genocide. And you're like, wow, I can't believe it wasn't. Spoiler alert, it was. Yeah, you're on a roll, X-Ray. It's like X-Ray can see right through me. Something that I don't know, my suspicion is that there's more working class Republicans. Something that I don't know is how the numbers are on leftists versus liberals. 5 years ago, I would have said that there are probably a lot more liberals, but I wonder with things like the Black Lives Matter movement and the Bernie movement, I wonder if there's been enough of a collective awakening. And with younger folks being more radical typically, I wonder if there's been enough of a collective awakening that leftists are another marginalized but majority group by this point. It is so hard to measure these things. But I think there is a groundswell that gets repressed by the media. And we're just kind of waiting for something, waiting for some structure to cling to. Some, you know, we had the George Floyd protests as an event to rally around. Part of the problem is that liberal leadership is very prominent in the news. Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Obama. Obama shows up, you know. Obama's like a fairy godfather who shows up every so often to kill strikes and shit, to kill labor movements. But liberal leadership, very prominent in the media. Leftist leadership, completely absent. Who is a leftist leader in this country? Who is more leftist than Bernie, who you would consider a leader? Like nobody. Like we don't know. We don't know any names. Like who's our leadership? And there's several reasons for that. One of them is that these folks never get coverage in the news. What's the closest we have is like Greta Thunberg, right? And she got in the news because she was a spectacle, because she was a child. And she's even barely a leftist leader. AOC is pretty left, but there are a lot of very valid criticisms of her. To me, she's She's really straddling the line of putting some radical ideas out there, but mostly upholding the same capital that the other Democrats are. I think the other folks in the squad are a little better than her, Ilhan Omar and folks like that, Ayanna Pressley. And she's doing her best to be that leftist leader. I think she's not good enough. So, like, no media coverage for leftist popular movements. But also, it's not a negligible factor that most leaders of leftist movements get assassinated by the state. We lost a lot of good leadership under the Obama administration in the Ferguson riots. A lot of the leaders of that protest movement were killed or disappeared. Same with the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. I know somebody personally who lost an arm protesting at the pipeline. Lost an arm to police brutality. So I think what leadership there is with good reason scared for their life. There's a very long and storied precedent of leftist leadership getting murdered. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. You know what I learned about recently? This is not really an example of leftist leadership per se, but I learned that after 9/11, there was a professional football player in the United States, American football, not kicking football, in North Dakota. Yeah, I guess so. But I learned that there was an American football player who quit professional football after 9/11 happened and signed up to serve in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever the fuck. Got deployed, immediately realized that the war was complete and utter bullshit, started voicing his opposition to the war, and got shot in the back of the head by a soldier in his unit. Patrick Tillman, thank you. Yes, that's the one. He got friendly fire assassinated by a soldier in his unit. So even a public figure just starting to get skeptical of US imperialism and beginning to voice it a little bit, even that is grounds for execution, apparently. So I really don't blame leftist leadership for being very cautious about coming forward. If Blobby dies in a mysterious accident, you'll know who it was. If I drown in the toilet or something. I remember during the Black Lives Matter protests, a lot of the leadership did not reveal their identities. They stayed masked, didn't reveal their face. I believe there were a lot of photos and videos being taken at the time, and I remember being encouraged as a protester not to remove my mask, not just for COVID safety, but for safety against the government learning who's at these protests. We were also suggested to not bring our phones, have our phones on for that reason, and also to wear very neutral clothing. But in a way, the masks served us well for that reason. But it's hard to rally around leadership who you don't know who they are. Because for better or for worse, we as humans need charismatic leadership. We need that charismatic legitimation of a figure like Martin Luther King Jr. Would you say it's the opposite for right-leaning idealists, like them wanting more exposure for what they think, or they feel more safe to expose their ideals? I would say that. I saw recently there's a right-wing streaming platform getting started. It's called like America is Today or something like that. And there's a lot of like Gen Z, young millennial right wing figures. They all look like they descended from the Habsburgs or some shit. Very happy to put forth even the most ridiculous claims. And Fox News, for example, provides a very big platform for that. And you never really hear about any of these folks getting assassinated. Nobody gave those instructions to people during the January 6th protest. What a shit show. We're still unpacking what the fuck was going on there. Because there was a lot going on. But can we think of any prominent right-wing figures in recent memory who've gotten assassinated other than by themselves for not getting vaccinated? I don't think so. And even the January 6th protests, right? Like, we haven't heard about any of them being subsequently assassinated. A few of them died during the invasion because they were invading the capital, so some people got shot. There was that fellow who died because he accidentally tased himself in the balls. That was pretty good. So yeah, I guess prominent right-wing figures mostly just assassinate themselves by accident. Ooh, Epstein? Does Epstein count? He was a Democrat, though, wasn't he? Or was he a Republican? Epstein certainly got assassinated. But that's for reasons of protecting capital, not because of anything he said. Not because of any politics he expressed. Just the names that he had. Honeypot, honeypot, I love you. Even if you look abroad, the United States habitually assassinates left-wing leadership and props up right-wing leadership in other countries in order to guard against an example being set that might lead to some anti-capitalist sentiment on a global scale. Ooh, I hate that, making you watch a full 30-second video ad. Ugh. How bad are the ads on this channel, chat? I don't have control over them. I mean, I can choose to air ads in certain moments so you don't have to see them at other times, but I don't tend to do that. Half bold. Okay. I'll make an effort to be bolder. But yeah, it's always like, US is always installing like right-wing military, basically fascist leadership. Because for the power structure of US imperialism, fascism is much more easy to utilize than an attempt at a socialist government or an attempt at some sort of left-wing revolution. Manufactured consent. That's an important term to be aware of. The United States is all about manufacturing consent. So the two-party system is an excellent example of this. We don't consent to things like the abortion ban in Texas, but the United States will say, hey, that's just, you consented to it by voting. You participated in the political process. You consented. We elected leaders that installed Supreme Court justici who believe exactly the opposite of what you do. And you had two choices, and you picked one, and they both would have done it. That's manufactured consent. Manufactured socialism doesn't work as well because every country that has had a decent shot at making a relatively anti-capitalist governmental system has been overthrown, kiboshed by the US. Coup, coup, coup. I come from a military-based family, so I know a lot about it kind of forcing the military on someone in a way. For me, luckily, I got to choose college, but I was being very heavily encouraged to join the military by my family, almost to a point to where if I didn't, I'd feel like I'd be ashamed of myself afterwards. But after years of talking about college instead, it finally got through to them. I'm glad that you managed to swing that, Slender Man. College is fucked up too, not as much as the military. But part of the reason that college is so unforgivably for profit in the United States, and part of the reason that a liberal democratic administration will never cancel student debt, no matter what promises they may or may not have given, is because it encourages military signups. If college is going to bury you under 6 feet of debt, then you have legitimate incentive to join the military. That's one of the things. In addition to the whole debt creation and maintenance process being profitable to corporations, it's also very profitable for people to be funneled into the military out of desperation. America needs places to keep their weapons or use their weapons. Oh yeah, we absolutely start wars almost exclusively for capital as well. It's not for justice. It's not for peace. When we started the wars in the Middle East after 9/11, Dick Cheney was found to be in possession of a map of, I believe, Iraq that divvied up the country into different areas of corporate control of oil reserves. So it basically had the names of corporations suggested in different areas of the countries. They were, even before the invasion, they were parceling up Iraq for profit. A lot of families do it, especially if they have a prominent military background. My older brother went into the military after high school. Ended up meeting his partner, who was also in the military, and her oldest son has just joined the military as of a month or two ago. I hope he'll be okay. My brother's been through a lot. To me, he seemed pretty broken after basic training. But he wasn't in combat or anything. He was in accounting, and he got to travel a lot, so I'm sure that was good for him. My grandpap was, I believe, a medic in the Korean War. I'm glad that he was at least a medic. Because I love my grandpap. I think he was a very sweet and gentle person.